Welcome to Educating the Human Potential, where we explore strategies to empower learners, educators, and parents through a Montessori lens.
My name is Biff Mayer.
And I'm Nicole Koman. On today's episode, we have incredible guests and guests that I know every parent, every educator has so many questions for. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Today we have Dr. Sharon Maxwell and Chelsea Maxwell. They are a mother and daughter team, which I think is incredibly fascinating and fun. Dr. Maxwell is a practicing clinical psychologist specializing in adolescent and family therapy, and author of an award-winning book, The Talk, which is a breakthrough guide to raising healthy kids in an over-sexualized, online, in-your-face world. Her daughter, Chelsea Maxwell, is an educator, learning designer, and a lecturer who previously specialized in curriculum development as well as technology and innovation for the Harvard Graduate School of Education, as well as having previously worked in advocacy for survivors of domestic violence. She is now focused on educating students about healthy relationships. Welcome, Dr. Maxwell and Chelsea. Nice to see you guys.
Good to be here.
Good to be here.
So we're very, very excited, Biff and I. Biff and I have been kind of prepping and chatting a little bit about kind of what direction we wanted to take this conversation, because I don't know that we'll ever have enough time to get through everything. But, the one thing that kind of, when I was introducing you all and reading about your bio, one thing that really stood out to me, Chelsea, I'll start with you, is this idea of educating our kids about healthy relationships. So I'm just wondering if you can kind of share with us how you would describe, what a healthy relationship means to you and how you describe that to families.
It's a great question and something we often find is not taught. I didn't really study this topic until I got to college, and I took a course that was about actually domestic violence, and I suddenly became really passionate about why is this not taught younger? What is and why aren't we teaching young kids what is a healthy relationship? So then when they get to college, they're not now just thinking about this for the first time. And so when we talk to kids about healthy relationships, we always make a big mind map on the board and just ask them, what are the qualities you'd want in a healthy relationship? And often at a young age, their knowledge about this starts with what they know about what's a good friendship. And it's pretty easy for them to get this list of qualities like trust and respect and kindness, all very important words. However, do they actually know what this looks like in practice? So we'll say things like, trust is so important. And what someone said to you, well, if you really trusted me, you'd give me the password to your social media account. Is that trust? So these big important words that are easily thrown around, we actually need to look at what this means in practice. And so much of that today is now navigated in an online setting that parents aren't even aware of. So having these conversations becomes so much more important.
I couldn't agree more. And I think as parents, I'm a parent of two kids. I have a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old. So they're kind of at that stage where they're asking a lot of questions, And, I think one thing that I've been thinking about, and I really wanted to ask the both of you, is, I'm, as a practicing psychologist, I feel pretty confident talking to my kids about most everything, right? I think about this idea. I'm going to use an example. I don't know why this is coming to mind, but I think it'll demonstrate my point. What I think about talking about death with my children, right? One of the things I talk to a lot of families about, and I do this with my family as well, is I don't say things like, so-and-so passed away, because I think that is ambiguous, that offers a lot of question. It's not straightforward. Is this person going to come back? Are they not? The reason I'm bringing this up is I'm very clear about with my kids, and I say, so-and-so unfortunately died, right? It's very final. There's no question for a child to kind of think through their head and kind of conceptualize it any other way. It's very straightforward. So when I think about talking about sex, right, I don't know that I feel as confident going straight in with, because it opens up, a whole can of worms, right? And so, but I think it's important to be confident when I do have that conversation. So can you guys share with us a little bit about how do other parents talk to you about this, feeling confident? How do I say this? What words do I use? Can you talk to us a little bit about that approach?
Yeah, I mean, when we do our curriculum with children, it's 5 hours with the children, but we never talk to the children until we've had 2 hours with the parents.
Amazing.
We absolutely have to be in alignment because nothing a child learns about sex in a curriculum is going to stick or have any kind of reality and meaning in their lives unless it's followed up at home. So part of part of educating a child is, and particularly in the concept of sex, because it's such a difficult thing for many parents to talk about, and there's so many different aspects to it, and we are saturated in an environment that is always giving them information about sex, in particularly in the online world. So it's vital that parents get hear um, how to approach this subject and the different aspects of it that need to be addressed. And the parents have their part, and as educators, we have our part. I think another way that we are always thinking about it is, and this is very much part of Montessori pedagogy, is we're asking children to be the research scientist of their own experience. They're not going to, nothing's going to land unless they've discovered it for themselves. And when we're asking them to, when we're looking at puberty, we're basically giving them a framework where they're now being asked to understand that this is something that's actually happening to them. And we're going to give them a framework to be able to investigate as research scientists of this phase of their life. So it's a good framework to put over anything that you're trying to educate, which is clearly Montessori knew this for a long time ago. You give them the opportunity to investigate this for themselves through the information that you're now giving them.
And also, research shows that when parents talk to their kids about sex, it delays sexual activity. And that research doesn't say you have to approach it in this way or you have to say these words. It's just the fact that as parents, you open up this conversation with your child, that shows that it delays sexual activity. And it makes sense if you really think about it because you're modeling for your child that this is something they can get accurate information about from a trusted adult. It's not something they have to just kind of get so anxious and then never get accurate information and it's going to just happen when the time's right, whatever that means. But then one day also this is something they can talk to their partners about in an educated, informed way. And so we really encourage parents to prepare for this conversation so you can go into it feeling prepared. And of course, you're going to get some question that might throw you for a loop. And if that's the case, just acknowledge to your child, this is such an important topic. I'm so glad you asked that question. Let's find a time and make a time right then that we'll have this conversation. And then you can do your preparation, whatever you need to do to collect yourself and figure out how you want to answer the question. But in that way, they know that this is something that, first of all, isn't scary to you because you don't want them to feel like they can't come to you. But they also know that it's important and that you want to be the source of accurate information for them.
Yeah, it's also not deeply secret and unspeakable, which I think is a common. So I have a couple questions. One, when you talk to parents before you talk to kids, are you talking with the parents and the kids together, or are you talking to the parents privately?
No.
So
There are
separate.
things that we will say to the parents that we would not say in front of children, and that we understand. For example, we think it's very important that parents have a way of talking to their kids about pornography. We are not going to talk to kids about pornography. We're not going to introduce that topic at any stage, but parents need to understand the impact that pornography is having on how children understand sex and how important it is to have a way of discussing that. And we give them resources for that. But that would be one of many examples that in our 2-hour parent talk, we actually started by saying, if your children are around, make sure they're somewhere else, and that this is a conversation just for the adults.
Nice. And when you come to schools and you're talking with parents and with kids, how young is too young to start this conversation?
We never think it's too young to start the conversation. For parents, it's something that you can unroll throughout the lifetime, right? It's not the talk. It's an ongoing conversation. When we come to schools will often Montessori schools will have us come 4th, 5th, and 6th. But we have come, we speak anywhere from 4th through 12th grade. But often I think a good time for children to start having the education, that at least the piece of the conversation that we're providing, is 4th grade.
Yeah, I mean, I think
we also will. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say that I think we introduced the concept in Montessori schools with talking about the reproduction of plants. I mean, that's kind of the first place a lot of the nomenclature is introduced to kids, so that hopefully some of that kind of the buzz around vocabulary is a little bit removed because they're familiar with it when they first start talking about human sexuality.
Absolutely, yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
No. It doesn't have to be a separate thing. That all of this is an integrated whole. We also, as Chelsea was saying, though, there are roots to this conversation that begin way before 4th grade, and you're not necessarily talking about sex per se, but you're giving them the skill sets that are necessary in order to hear all about this and later on. And some of the fundamentals are helping a child develop the capacity for self-reflection, understanding the relationship between self-discipline and freedom, and clearly accurate and communication. Those are 3 skill sets that begin way before you learn about sex ed. That are vital. There are ways for parents of younger children to begin to nurture these capacities in the child.
Sounds like you're sort of talking about the framework that you discuss in the book. Can you explain the framework a little bit?
For the sex ed curriculum?
Yeah, I mean, there are
you mean
connecting
speaking to
the
these
dots
3 skills?
amongst the... Sorry?
Are you referring to the 3 skills, like the self-reflection, communication, and self-control, or?
Well, I was thinking about, I think you mentioned that it's important to relate a lot of these different things with each other, including not only reproduction, but also social power and also sexual desire, of course, and then also just what is intimacy and, whole framework of things.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we try to do is that we're looking at how the culture, as we're living in it right now, has partitioned out this concept of sex. And when we do that, we're looking at, how, there's the biology aspects of sex. There's the power of sexy, which is sold to our children at a very, very young age. There's the ethics of sexual behavior, which is also which is often only relegated to the domain of religion, without understanding that the ethics of healthy sexual behavior is a bigger is available to everybody, whether you have a religious belief system or not. And then this whole idea of romance and love and all the stuff that's being sold in that domain as well. So we look at those different aspects and we say, well, what's missing here? Well, there's an integration of one complete understanding of all the different aspects of sexuality, where and particularly this understanding of what is the link between the biology of reproduction, which when you're talking to children about, like, oh, yucky, that's all, you get this whole response like that. And then you go over to the power of sexy, and everybody's all, oh, we understand, the social currency of being sexy, even if I have not a clue what sexy means, So, I mean, to have an integrated approach, the link between those two is sexual desire, and it's a bigger topic than just sexual desire. I mean, one of the things that is very important, I think, in our conversation, whether we're teaching our, nurturing human values in the digital world curriculum or the sexual health curriculum, the whole understanding of what is human desire about, how is it manipulated, what are the skill sets that you need to deal with your desires effectively, what makes you human, and what is the ethical part of if you have the capacity for self-control, what are the ethics necessary to make good decisions with that self-control? And this is an entire part of both curriculums, actually, is understanding what is human desire, whether it's desire for food or whether it's desire for sex. What is that all about? One of the really important parts of this is that we're living in a culture that is stimulating our desire 24/7 for profit, and that's just how the world works. But if we don't educate children as to what that means, and how they have to be in, the power, the literal freedom and power that comes from having self-control, then they're never going to be free to make choices that they want to make. And that's integral to understanding your sexual desire, is to understanding, how you're engaging for the second hour on YouTube. All of these things are connected through giving them a comprehensive understanding of what is the nature of desire, and how do you navigate that in a world that's always trying to stimulate that in you.
I love that you said that, and it's sparking this question that I had as well. About this, about accessibility to maybe things that our children aren't ready for, right? So with the internet, we can't control what our kids are talking about at school with their friends and whatever they've been exposed to or have access to, right? And so I think about it in a way of, I guess my question is, how would you change, let's say our kids go to school and they hear about something that maybe perhaps we haven't gotten to at home, right? They heard it from their parents, they were ready for it at that time, but we haven't quite gotten to it. How do you change a child's schema about sex when they've already heard it, right? Or they have an exposure to it and maybe it's incorrect information, right? Like, can you talk a little bit about that, or does that come up in some of the questions that parents ask?
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think the first thing that even comes before is, as much as you can be proactive, not waiting. Some parents say, oh, I'll know my child's ready because they'll come to me with a question.
They're not going to.
Most children will never come to you with that question. So definitely being proactive, because they may have already heard information that they're not telling you. Research shows that by 8 years old in the United States, kids have heard something about sex. So definitely being proactive, getting there first, laying the foundation with your family values is step one. And of course, there will always be things that maybe you haven't laid that foundation yet. And then they come to you, and now what? And the first thing is, when they come to you with that information, not acting shocked or angry or where did you get that from? Or I need to call that parent, because that shuts down the conversation and they're not going to come back to you.
And it causes a negative reaction, right? And maybe
Exactly.
fear, or maybe they were confused by it and they were coming to you. And then, I think, I'm sorry didn't mean to cut you off, but
Sure.
I just think about it as much as we can all be trained to interact with our kids, and we don't know how, we don't know what to expect, right? And so we need to be ready at all times. But I think, go on. I think this is really helpful to hear kind of what we shouldn't do, right?
Well, there's just one thing is, prime directive for all parenting is keep them talking. Keep the communication open. Prime directive, bigger than anything else. Keep the communication open, because once that's shut down, you don't know what's happening. And in a digital world, you don't know what's happening anyway. So now you really don't know what's happening. So keep the conversation going is number one. Number two would be, in our family, we believe that. Right? In our family, we think that what you say matters and reflects who you are, even if you're putting it into, 140 characters, even if you're sending a snap on Snapchat, in our family, we believe that what you say reflects who you are and reflects who we are as a family. That's critical. Now if they're a certain age, they're going to roll their eyes and go, oh my God, you have no understanding of what's going on, all of that. And you're like, I'm sure you're right. And what you need to know is, in our family, we, and you continue. Now, you won't know the complete effect of what that will have done. But what you do know is they will have a structure of values in their head based on your belief system that they can either scroll back to or ignore. That decision is going to be theirs, but at least it's there. If we don't even know that conversation is necessary, then that's not there. That reality of in our family, they have no idea. So I mean, and again, this is all, if they're in 4th grade, they're going to listen to everything you say. If they're in 7th grade, you're going to be talking and talking and talking and hope that something is coming through, but they still need that data.
And it's a balance, right? Because you want to give your values and you want to keep the conversation going. So it's not a lecture. It's having these conversations in little bite-sized pieces where you can give your values and also ask questions to keep them talking.
Mm-hmm. I love that, to keep them talking. I love that because it's not just answering the question, okay, we're all going to go to separate rooms, we're done here. It's making sure that we've satisfied their curiosity of whatever the topic might be. What do you suggest? I'm sorry if I know you had a question. I have one more question.
Go ahead.
I'm very excited, everyone. What do you suggest? Because you had said, Chelsea, start having the conversation. Let's get it going before someone else does, right? What would you all suggest is the first pass, with your kids about sex? What would you suggest is the first topic, if you will, and all the topics that fall under that umbrella that we should start the conversation with our kids?
I mean, I think it's little pieces. So when you have toddlers, you have accurate names for the body parts, right? So that this isn't something, I mean, when you give a little silly name to something, now it's something that's kind of like you can't use real names because it's kind of a uptight sort of thing. So you're already starting to give that message when you do that. So using accurate parts for the body, teaching about what is privacy, all these are things that slowly start, right? And then when it actually comes to, there's different topics because there's what is sex and there's how are babies made. Often when children are young, they might ask, oh, how is a baby made, right? Because they see someone who's pregnant or there's a new baby in the family. And then, there's many books for children that can answer that question. And you don't need to go into everything all at once, right? So again, it's small bite-sized conversations.
And understanding that you're responding to your child in that moment with a complete understanding that they're getting a lot more information than you're aware of. So giving them accurate information, it is responding to the needs of the moment, but also using the environment that you're in. This all started because my son basically said, do you know what hookers and strippers are? At 7 years old, and in a Montessori school, and asked me, what is a hooker? And I realized that he's just gotten information from a child in the playground about a video game that a 12-year-old was playing, where if you kill people, you get to see naked women. So I mean, there's information out there. I mean, and that set me on a path of saying, I need to be telling him now what I understand, a good way of understanding what is sex, and so that he gets it. And at that age, he's not going to get all of it, but he's going to have something in his head. Better than killing people leads to getting to see naked ladies, and that's what a hooker is.
That's a good life lesson.
I mean, so I mean, there's you have and this isn't an unusual experience for parents to be having. It just happens that he happened to be saying that to me. The kid who was telling him that, their parent, she had no idea that their child had seen anything like that. So, again, sometimes parents of young children will say to us, how can I talk to my kids about sex? They still believe in Santa Claus, and part of the response to that is you're not ruining their innocence by telling them, what is sex, and if we lived on a farm, they'd be seeing animals, being actually having sex, and it would not be something that we would be afraid to be talking about. It would be something just natural and clear, and we add all of the discomfort to that. Culturally, we are adding that. We're putting the sexy thing in there and making it something that we're all now very uncomfortable with. But by itself, there is nothing dirty or awful or ruining a child's innocence to understand the basics of what is.
Yeah, we all carry the anxiety that we had when we were kids, and we're still carrying it. So we don't want to hand it off. On the other hand, we're afraid of doing it wrong. So absolutely, yeah. What I love about this conversation is that your description of so many things really is a reflection of philosophy of a Montessori classroom. so many different times when you've been talking, I've thought, well, that's what we try to do within the classroom setting. And I was thinking, particularly when you said, well, in our family we do, because I think that is commonly the statement within the family of the classroom too. Well, in this school, we believe, and the role of the community and the role of the shared values of the community, I think, have to be spoken in the same way that they have to be spoken in the family. So that there's this little voice that's in your head, and when you're deciding what kind of self-control and what kind of regulation you have, part of the argument is being made by that little voice.
Developing that voice also, it's essential to have time for self-reflection in order to develop that voice. And I think the Montessori environment allows for that. I think our culture doesn't allow for time for self-reflection. And until you can develop that internal relationship with self, you're kind of lost to the culture that you're in. So, I mean, that's it's really the core to any of the workshops or presentations or curricula that we do, is to value and teach the importance of self-reflection so that the child develops that inner voice that you're talking about. That's absolutely core to anything. The entire first hour of the sexual health curriculum has nothing to do with sex. It's all about the power of self-reflection. So that and developing a healthy relationship with self.
And that becomes critical as we go throughout the curriculum. For example, often when we teach about consent, we get a lot of questions, often from girls who say, well, we understand what consent means, but if I say no, won't that hurt the other person's feelings? And we're talking about consent as it relates to all different forms of touch, physical touch. And I can't tell you how many times I've received that question. And it's really, then it's a perfect opportunity to come back to that relationship with self, right? Because you have to first have that relationship with self where, first of all, you know how you feel about this, you know what you feel comfortable with and don't feel comfortable with, but also you value how you feel enough to know that that matters and that it's not just the other person's feelings that matter.
So critical.
It is critical. I mean, just thinking about, I think that's been missed all of these years when we think about sex education, is we're just going straight to the biological part of it or the physical action of it all. But I love that the first thing you all are thinking about and teaching the kids at a very young age is how to love yourself and how to listen to yourself and who you are, because we're all different, right? We all have individual interests and needs and wants in life, but unless we know who we are and what we're comfortable with, as me, Nicole, and you all, I just love that. That's such an important lesson. I think also I wanted to ask you all, from, again, the parenting perspective of it all. And I also really love the idea that you guys do this parent training, right? So really generalize what you're teaching in the classroom and giving the parents maybe some language. Because I know parents, all we want is, what do we say? How do we say it so we don't screw up our kids, right? And so do you guys do parent training aside from the 2 sessions that you do for the actual curriculum in the school?
Yeah, we do a 2-hour parent presentation that outlines the way that you can discuss this with the different aspects to be discussed with your child. Also, really educating them as to the impact that the internet is having on, and how much more critical this is, that they get in there and start the conversation. How it relates to healthy relationships and all the different aspects. We lay that out in 2 hours for the parents. When it's included in the curriculum that we're doing, we do all of that, as well as go through the 5 hours of the curriculum so the parent knows exactly what we're teaching, what our role is, and what we expect their role to be, which is, dividing that up becomes a very important part of the child's experience. But yeah, we do a 2-hour presentation. Often we'll be asked to come into a school. They're not sure if they want the curriculum. They just want to hear how we talk about this. And so we start with that parent presentation, and then they decide, what they want.
So incredibly important.
Yep.
If you don't mind, I wanted to go back to this concept of sexy, right? So I have a 7-year-old daughter. Um, and she is very much, I'd say, it scares my husband and I sometimes. The things that she's starting to say at 7 years old, the things that she's interested in, the way she likes to dress, the accessories, but thinking about her forward-facing self, right? So how she goes to school every day. She's, for better or for worse, she knows what she wants, but it is a little bit advanced in my opinion. Um, I think our society, and I'm seeing this with the social media piece. I'll just stick with social media for this point. Is everything is sexy. Our pop stars are sexy. But that's important. That's more important than, I don't know, being a good friend, or that's just such a concept ingrained. Even though no one's ever told that to her or young children, it's so powerful. That message is sent somehow through media and whatnot. How do you how do you talk to parents about that, and maybe changing that schema again? I'm going to that idea as well. Is again, these girls are in my opinion are focusing on the wrong things right now, and how do we change that in a healthy way without being overcritical?
I mean, you're not going to change the culture that you're living in.
Sure, right.
You have that, and so I think you have to start there, because otherwise you take a stance that is going to make them want to resist you even more. So I mean, you have to be there. I mean, the psychology of that very well. If so you're not coming up again, and there's room for a lot of diversity on this topic. Everyone doesn't have to feel the same way about how we dress or how we act. Being aware of the environments, again, we're back to the importance of environment, which is core to the whole Montessori way of understanding things. Being aware of how different environments are affecting your child, and having some clarity over what environments you're going to allow them to be in. A lot of this has to do with when are they going to have access to screens. You can have there's an app where preteen girls go in and ask the question to the universe, "Am I pretty or ugly?" And then pose in their sexiest outfits and get blasted by the internet. And why would they even think of doing that? Why would that even be a topic?
Sure.
And it's important to understand this whole online world. It's an attention economy, right?
Absolutely.
So the more attention you get, the more money you get.
Correct.
And the more successful you are.
Mhm.
And it's not about good attention or bad attention. It's just the likes, the shares.
It doesn't discriminate. It could be good or bad. It's attention, right?
Exactly. And so children are taking that on and evaluating themselves in that same way.
And it's also, I mean, this is when we do that curriculum, we have 2 hours for the parents as well. But often parents aren't aware of the long-term effects that this attention economy is actually having on kids. I mean, you should send it to you. We have a list of the values of the digital world, and I use the word values in quotes. But any attention is good attention is one of the values in the digital world, and that is having such severe psychological ramifications for preteens and teens. Not being able to not discriminating between good attention and bad attention is manifestly harmful to understanding what it means to grow into becoming a human being in the world. But parents aren't understanding this, and they're not getting that this is not a prepared environment,
right,
for the health of human beings. This is an attention economy, and kids have to be educated there. I mean, we go in and we start with 4th, 5th, and 6th in Montessori schools and talk to them about what it means to manipulate your brain to keep your attention. Because it's not enough. I mean, otherwise, as parents, we're left with this, no, you can't, no, which just, is nothing but fighting. When kids get educated as to how they're being manipulated, when they see the impact, because they've been given exercises to do and things to think about and talk about as groups, and then come back and say, wow, this is, and then with the older kids, the implications that is having for the culture that we're all living in, then you've got something going that actually has some legs in terms of them becoming the owners of this environment and understanding how they want this environment to be. There isn't a simple, you talk about this and it's going to make it go away. Nothing's going to make this go away. This is, in our family, this, but being very aware of how the impact of the environment on your children's brains. And the connection that Montessori was having with prepared environment and what science is now talking about with neuroplasticity is absolutely critical to really getting in there and designing a curriculum that uses that pedagogical umbrella to have kids become the research scientists of this themselves, because in the end, they are going to be in control of that environment. But we are not giving them the tools to do that well.
Yeah, I mean, self-control, we have to get kids to start thinking about self-control as a muscle, they're
Muscle, absolutely.
Exactly what we say.
Exactly what we say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question. Well, and it's kind of related to self-control, and I think a lot of parents have this thought is this concept of when is it too young, or when is it the appropriate age? Let's go there to get a phone, right? So that's a big struggle. I hear a lot in my practice, and on the playground at the elementary school. My son's about to go to middle school, so it's so and so already has a phone, But I think for a lot of us that are kind of hesitating on it, what we're hesitating about is the access to the internet, right? When on the iPhone or any kind of cell phone. What do you all say when parents ask you that question about how young is, when it is the appropriate age that we can start to, allow, our children to have a phone, but then also develop healthy relationships and healthy habits around having a phone?
I mean, as we're talking about environments, the online world is a completely unpredictable environment that you're basically giving your kids the keys to when you give them a phone. And so as much as you can delay that, I mean, there's great movements of parents that come together, like wait until 8th. There's a lot of benefits for delaying that. Once you give access, it becomes impossible to take it away. And there's that constant battle. There's wonderful ways that you can unroll it slowly. Like a lot of parents now are starting by just giving kids flip phones where they don't have access to the internet. They can just make phone calls. Maybe they can text, but they don't have access to all the different apps that are there. It's not easy when everyone's starting to get one. And that's why it's helpful in school environments if you have someone come in, a speaker come in and kind of, and then parents can start. There's many groups of parents we see all over the country that are coming together in groups to discuss this topic together so that their kid is not the only kid without a cell phone. And that's really helpful for the parents and for the kids. But definitely we see a lot of benefits to waiting until 8th for access to social media on phones.
Absolutely. And to the point that you all said earlier about that this is just so attention driven, right? This whole concept, having the phone, you're right, Chelsea, we're giving them the keys to this whole new world, right? And then, the social media piece and the attention seeking piece and then they get lost in it, right? And I think just from a simple perspective of sitting across from my child at the dinner table, if he had a phone, there was no way he'd be talking to me, right? That is much more exciting than I am, right? But having those nice boundaries.
Boundaries are very important. And before, also one thing we really advocate for is just like you're handing keys to this environment, you need driver's ed. You need driver's ed for the digital
I like
world.
that a lot. Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah. So it's like you can't just say no phones, no phones, no phones. Okay, here's a phone. And they have no preparation for how to navigate this successfully. And it's a tool, and they need to know how to use this tool accurately, responsibly, so that they don't get used by it. And so that's why that's the basis of we have 5-hour curriculum we do with students, which is driver's ed for the digital world. And so whenever that time is that you think your kid should have access to it, they need some sort of education prior to that.
I love the potential for that metaphor. There's somebody trying to get a hold of your steering wheel. There's somebody trying to push your foot down so that you're moving faster. All these kind of that's
Exactly.
really nice. Can you talk a little bit more about the neuroscience that's involved in this, in developing self-control?
I mean, I can't talk well about all the different aspects of neuroscience but what I can do is I can talk well about the kinds of psychology that are being used to break down self-control. That how overwhelming it is for a child to live in a world that is always telling them that they have a right to have whatever they want, to have their needs met immediately, right? That's what freedom is about, to have what I want when I want it, as opposed to any kind of choice being used and having the power to make choice. When we use very broad strokes when we talk about self-control, we break it down. We have a metaphor that we use of a waterfall, a power generator at the bottom of the waterfall, and electrical wires going out of the power generator lighting up the city. And we say your brain is kind of reflected here, like your ancient brain, and the amygdala is what is the waterfall. It's generating desires 24/7, and most of those desires are related to survival as a species.
And there's nothing bad about that.
And there's nothing bad about that, but it's pure raw energy. Desires are energy, and your body is filled with energy to fulfill that desire. Now, what you have that the rest of the animal kingdom only has to a very small degree is you have a prefrontal cortex. And that prefrontal cortex is the only part of your brain that gives you the capacity to pause and think before you act on the amygdala, on all those desires that are coming from the amygdala. And you have to, strengthen that through use. You have to strengthen that prefrontal cortex in order to have the capacity to not just act on a desire. And we talk, something as simple for children as, if a dog was brought into a restaurant, it wouldn't know to sit at the table. It would go eat food off of everybody's table. It has no self-control. Like you understand that even though you're hungry, you have to wait for your food. And it's something that simple, right?
And self-control gives you freedom, right? Yeah. We often think of self-control as, it's something I have to do. But self-control gives you freedom, because without self-control, you're led around by your desires like a dog is led around with a treat, right? But what self-control gives you, that freedom to act on what you really know, your ethics, your values, all of that.
And prioritize.
So,
right.
Yeah, exactly.
And that desire is something that is always being manipulated. All of it is, when you're talking about the neuroscience of self-control, the psychologists have, the ones that make the big bucks are the ones that are basically figuring out ways to break down self-control and to have people act impulsively on their desires. And no matter what technique. And we actually, in the curriculum, we actually go through, we read a quote from an ad executive about how to manipulate a child's desire to want a product. And we talk about what does that mean? And we actually give them examples of manipulating their desire within the curriculum, so that they're feeling how easy it is to manipulate desire and how strong they have to have both. And this is not just the self-control, this is also self-reflection. To know who you are is to know what you want to do. To have that muscle of self-control is to be able to then act on who you are. Those two things have to go hand in hand, or you don't have a plan for dealing with the world.
Which is why
becoming a successful, happy adult.
I didn't mean to cut you off there, but I got excited because it's all coming together. That's the forefront of your curriculum, is teaching the child who they are, right? And so that's the
Yeah. But I think it's also helpful to, in the metaphor, you almost need the people that are in there training you to act like a dog, that are trying to convince you to go eat off everybody else's plate, so that.
Well, and
yeah, I mean, I think there's something motivating potentially to have kids know that that there's somebody out to get them.
And that's critical for when we talk to kids about, this driver's ed for the digital world, is understanding the manipulation that's constantly at play. And when you start talking to kids about that, they lean in, because they don't want to be manipulated. And so we talk to them about how these app developers appeal to the amygdala, appeal to our need for social approval. That's critical to our survival, right? That actually need for social approval has kept us alive for generations and generations. But now they're using that to get our attention. They're using it against us, our survival instincts against us. Or they also appeal to our need to share shocking, scary information as soon as possible. That's our amygdala acting, right? That's us being like, we need to protect our tribe. But all of a sudden now that survival instinct is being used against us for them to make money.
This is incredibly fascinating. I'm sorry, Dr. Maxwell.
No. When kids understand this, they get very excited. This, and again, that curriculum as well starts with them being the research scientists of what's happening inside of themselves as they're engaging with all of these, devices, but also externally in the world, what's happening to the world. This is taking it past, the 6 years old. Now you're taking it into looking at the bigger world picture, which Montessori was very much about, very much wanting to see what is the impact, for yourself right now, what is the impact of this digital environment on the environment in the world that we're living in. That kids are fascinated with that and they want to go there. They want to have those conversations. But yeah, it's a very exciting time. And what's always amazes me is how many of the fundamental principles of Montessori education could so easily be applied to some of the very difficult problems that we're facing right now in the world.
I want to be mindful of your time. I know that Biff and I could talk to you all day, and we have a million questions for you. But I do want to bring up before we all let you all go, Dr. Maxwell, I see that you have another book coming out. Can you tell us a little bit about it and what's the title of it?
That book has been delayed so many times.
Oh, no.
We are working. Basically, it's nurturing human values in a digital world. It's a handbook for parents to really be understanding and using that understanding to effectively deal with children around devices. Because I see that, Chelsea together, and I see that as the most critical aspect of what's happening in the world today. It's absolutely fundamental. And so that's what we're working on.
I love it. I'm really excited for you all. And I think if anything I demonstrated today is as parents, we need a handbook. We need your help because this is a scary world. It's the social media piece is terrifying, but it's nice to hear that we have experts like you all, educating us and educating our children. So I want to thank you so much for your time. I can't even begin to tell you how fascinating this conversation was and helpful. So we really appreciate it.
Hopefully we'll do it again sometime.
That would be great. That would be great. And we can't wait to hear all the other speakers you're going to have because it's such a great book that you wrote, and it's such a necessary topic for right now. So we're very excited about what you guys are doing.
Oh, thanks so much. And it was a pleasure meeting you all. And we hope to speak with you all soon.
Thank you.
Take care.
If you're enjoying this conversation as much as we are, following the show on your streaming service really helps more people discover the podcast. Thanks so much. And I'm looking forward to our next conversation. This episode is sponsored by TriNet. TriNet offers comprehensive HR solutions specifically designed for the education sector. Their services include payroll processing, benefits administration, risk mitigation, and compliance support. It enables schools and educational institutions to focus on their core mission. With TriNet, managing HR becomes seamless, allowing educators to dedicate more of their time to teaching and supporting students. To find out more, go to trinet.com/AMS2025. This podcast is produced by AMS, the American Montessori Society. However, the views that are expressed belong to us and to those of our guests. They do not represent those of the American Montessori Society.